Hey, I'm Hunt, and this is Hunt on LSU, your channel for LSU Fighting Tiger football talk. Enjoy the video. We want you to leave a comment below, hit that like button, and subscribe right below the video. Enjoy. You all know, 2 days ago, conference realignment took its most recent form. You saw Texas and Oklahoma come into the Southeastern Conference. You saw Stanford and Cal go over to the ACC. You saw the Big Ten poach a lot of the Pac-12 schools that they wanted. You saw the Pac-12 bottom feeders kind of migrate into the Big 12. And so Stuart Mandel took all that information, and he took every team in what is now the Power 4, and he graded them on a 5 to -5 scale. I'll explain. If he thought that conference realignment was phenomenal for you, you got a +5. If you thought it was pretty good, you got +3. You get it? If you thought that it didn't really matter to you at all, then you got 0. And if you thought it was really, really bad for you, you got -5. So that was the worst it could get, 5 the best it could get. I think it makes a lot of sense. And I'll be honest, I think he did a really good job with this. And I agreed with a lot of what he had to say. I'm going to get into some of the ones from around the country that I thought were interesting in the second hour. But for now, let's just dig into the SEC and kind of what he thought. And I agree with a lot of this. I'll actually, interestingly enough, start where I don't necessarily agree a ton. He said that the two schools that would benefit the most were Alabama and Georgia. They were +4. I don't necessarily see where Alabama and Georgia benefit a ton from Texas and Oklahoma coming in. I don't think it hurts them in any way, but I would have put them closer to 0. As he writes it, I don't expect post-Nick Saban Alabama to make a 12-team college playoff. I don't expect post-Nick Saban Alabama to make a 12-team college football playoff nearly every single year like I do Ohio State, simply because of the depth of the SEC, but it's still one of the small handful of teams built to succeed in any era. So, and he says the same thing about Georgia. It's basically like, I think that the fact that in this new era we have a 12-team playoff, that helps them more so than Oklahoma and Texas coming in. So I guess I'll play along with that as well. He actually gives LSU +3 on this, says the Tigers have won 3 national championships in this century, but they might have played for even more were there a 12-team field. They would have made 9 by now. Of course, they may also fire more coaches frequently for missing the playoff. That is an interesting piece to this 12-team playoff. I think that a lot of people are looking at the 12-team playoff and going, the teams like Wisconsin, the teams like Ole Miss, teams like Texas A&M, these teams that have reeled off a 10-win season here or there, but we haven't really felt them as a threat at the very, very top of the sport, they actually can get in now. And that 10-win season that gets them in feels attainable. Maybe at Ole Miss or Wisconsin, you didn't feel like you could go 12-0. Like that wasn't going to happen like Georgia's done, like LSU's done, like Michigan's done, like some of these teams have done. That doesn't feel as attainable as, we can just go 10-2. And that's a big help to them. But I also think it's still very, very difficult for them to win a national championship because you have to get there and win those games. And generally speaking, I find it difficult to believe that those teams are going to do that. However, it's not as difficult, and call me a homer if you will, but I believe this, it's not as difficult for me to look at some of the LSU teams that didn't make the quote-unquote playoff, BCS championship game, whatever the case may have been, time to time. What about the 2001 team that was rolling offensively and ended up playing in that Sugar Bowl against Illinois? Did anybody want to play that offense? To a greater extent, did anybody want to play LSU in 2006? That team that had Jamarcus Russell and Dwayne Bowe and Buster Davis and LaRon Landry and that whole crew that went and just crushed Notre Dame. If we got a 12-team playoff, that team's a problem. Yeah, they lost a couple of games. Yeah, Hurricane Katrina, not a great situation for them. You lost a big lead to Tennessee. You were completely out of gas in the SEC championship game. But by the time they caught their breath, did anybody want to play them? 05 and it was 05. That was 05. 05 team, same thing. They ran out of gas, but they were really good, and they would have gotten a 12 team. And the 06 team that did lose to Auburn because Jimbo didn't let Jamarcus throw it, and did lose to Florida, who eventually won the national championship. But did anybody want to play those teams? Anybody want to play LSU in 2012 at the end? They gave Alabama all they wanted. And those teams might get in. And so I think that's a nice benefit in terms of winning a national championship for a team and a program like LSU that has teams that may lose 2 games, but still has the ability to get red hot and rattle off some wins. I kind of like that. Now, here's a couple of the others that I really do agree with. He gave Texas a +3, and I completely agree. They now jump into a pool where they're going to get more money from television contracts than they were, even with the Longhorn Network. The beast that is the SEC Network is going to feed them exceptionally well, and they now don't have to fight off the SEC. You can come play in the SEC. Don't play at Texas in the crappy Big 12. Come play for us, whether that's A&M, LSU, whoever, in the SEC. Now that can't be used for them. So I absolutely think that Texas benefits a bunch from coming into the SEC. But by the same token, he gives Oklahoma a -3. Why? Well, because of the expectation. If you were listening back on Monday when we had Brandon Drum on, he covers Oklahoma, and he said, since the Big 12 started, Oklahoma has won half the league titles. Half. They will not do that in the SEC. You can't play your C+ game that you were using to beat Kansas State, that you were using to beat TCU, that you were using to beat Iowa State. That won't fly in some of these SEC venues on the road. It goes without saying at Georgia, at Alabama, at Tiger Stadium, whatever. But even some of the other ones. I mean, there's even more. There's more now. It's A&M, it's Texas, it's Tennessee, it's Florida. Like, I haven't even dipped into the Starkville and Oxford and Lexington yet. They're just more up at the top. Keep in mind, Oklahoma has never played at Texas. So what's the toughest road venue in the league they play in? At Oklahoma State? Is that it? At Baylor? Well, now you got to play real road games. And the same thing goes for Texas to an extent, but I think Texas, with it being in that state, I think that A&M being next door and having that ability to pitch the SEC, I think there's a little bit of a differentiator there. So I kind of agree with the way that he chops that up. Now, we are fully in agreement here. The bottom of the league gets hurt by bringing in these 2 programs. Your Vanderbilts, your South Carolinas, your Kentuckys, your Mississippi States, your Arkansas. He's got them all on the negative side. Arkansas -2, completely agree with Texas coming in. Kentucky -3. He actually adds in that Kentucky piece that, hey, you're not in the SEC East anymore. And that's true, they're not. That doesn't exist. So you don't get guaranteed Vanderbilt anymore. You don't get guaranteed Missouri anymore. You don't get guaranteed South Carolina anymore. Now, you play Mississippi State and Arkansas and whatever, but like those were guaranteed games on Kentucky's schedule, and Mark Stoops used those games to win 9-10 games. Tennessee was asleep for a long time. Kentucky used a little bit of that late. I think this hurts them. And then when you are South Carolina and Vanderbilt, 2 programs that have enjoyed very, very little success, just adding 2 big brands that are potentially on your schedule is not a positive. I'm completely with you. He says Auburn gets a -1. I think that's just based on Auburn kind of having a seat right below the elite of the elite. They've had great teams. They won a national championship. They've gone undefeated. Like, they've had a real proud program. They've also had more down years than a lot of the teams. More down years than LSU. More down years, I think, even than Florida recently. And adding 2 SEC teams and 2 big brands like that may not be a huge benefit to them. He's got Missouri as a -1. I agree with that. He's got A&M as a -2. I completely agree with that, just because we talked about their rivalry with Texas and even Oklahoma to an extent, and now not being able to sell. We're in the SEC. They're not. So I think I really kind of jive with most of what Stuart Mandel says about this. The only 0 he has is Tennessee. He says that it just doesn't affect the Vols all that much. He writes, the Vols are still playing rivals Alabama, Florida, and Georgia for the next 2 seasons while adding Oklahoma. That's rough, but Tennessee's collective is strong, has the resources and recruiting cachet to reach occasional college football playoffs. Don't know that that's a lot different than where they necessarily were previously. So it's a mixed bag, and I think that you can paint with a broad brush here without going to individual lines and say, hey, the baddest dudes on the SEC block are still bad dudes, and they're going to be fine in an era where you can get 12 teams in. The bottom feeders are taking a hit here because you're potentially adding another loss or 2 onto their schedule. The teams that are directly impacted geographically, Texas A&M, speaking to one, maybe Arkansas to another extent. Two, those teams potentially take a hit in recruiting. I think for Texas, it elevates you. For Oklahoma, lower your expectations from the Big 12 just a smidge. You're not going to win this conference 50% of the time. You're not going to win this conference 30% of the time. So it's a different world. And then for some of the teams right there on the outside looking in, like Ole Miss, maybe the 12-team playoff, even though you've got a tougher league, maybe a 12-team playoff, you've got a better chance to climb into the college football playoff. And then I think for LSU, his thinking is you're still going to recruit like crazy, you still got a lot of money, and hey, you could contend for a national championship even if you don't play perfectly, which they had to do in basically 19 and 11 from September 1st through Christmas. You don't have to be perfect. Got a little bit more runway there. So I find that fascinating. I find that interesting. And I got to tell y'all, like, we've talked about this, and y'all know my feelings on it, but I'll echo them here in early July. Like, I'm good with this. I'm good with Texas and Oklahoma coming in. I'm good with the 12-team playoff. Like, I'm okay that you're not going to play Auburn every year. I'm okay that you're not playing Mississippi State every year. I'm okay that you're not going to play Florida every year. I'm okay that you're not going to play Alabama every year. Like, this is big-time football. They're going to be very interesting games, and LSU is going to be in the mix on November 1st far more often than they're not. And that, to me, is a good thing. I posed a question on Twitter earlier today, and the poll just wrapped up. It says, we all know where this is me speaking on Twitter. We all know where this is headed, but if you had the choice, would you go back to the conferences as they were in 2000 with Miami and Virginia Tech in the Big East and the whole Pac-12 there and A&M and Missouri in the Big 12 and the 12-team SEC? Would you go back to that, or would you form two super leagues, get rid of the rent-a-win games that we play every September in the second to last week of the year, go to a 12-team playoff and look more like the NFL? Beck, you're listening to that. I don't know if you're looking at my Twitter, but would you rather go back to 2000 the way it was? Would you rather play it with two super leagues and no rent-a-win games? One, what do you want, and what do you think the Twitter poll said?
I would assume that the Twitter poll said that they don't want the rent-a-win games and they would not want to go back to 2000. I think most people don't enjoy watching LSU win 45-3. Mm-hmm. It's not an enjoyable experience. It doesn't put butts in seats. So I can't really see the reasoning other than the fact that the tradition, and also just I think I understand somewhat from the team's point of view that it is helpful to have those games to have a game like atmosphere and play a game kind of like a preseason game.
Yes.
So that from that point of view, I understand it, but at the same time, it just doesn't really make sense for anyone to want those games.
So you want the super leagues too?
Sure.
Okay. Twitter poll: 60% say they want to go back to 2000. 40% say they want the super leagues.
Wow.
I will tell you this. This is a powerful thing with people. There is a huge difference in people's minds with LSU playing Auburn and LSU playing Oklahoma. Like, that is a big deal to some people, and I get that. There's an emotional attachment when you go into Tiger Stadium and that Navy jersey comes out of the tunnel. It's something you've seen your entire life. It creates an emotion. You remember a lot of things, and that's all very, very powerful, and I'm with you there. But to me personally, if it's kind of nameless and faceless. If they are 8-0 and they're ranked third in the country, whether they come out of there screaming Boomer Sooner or War Eagle, and LSU's on the other sideline, like, I'm ready to go. Like, that's how I feel about it. But I do understand that people yearn for that tradition, and that's what you're seeing in this. Go back to the 2000s conference. They want to play Florida. They want to play Auburn. They want to play Bama. They don't give a damn about playing Texas. I think that's the feeling of people.
And people will probably feel that way for a little bit, but eventually those rivalries were formed over years of playing against each other. So whenever there's going to be a game, just like it took a while for A&M, but you had the 7 overtime game, and that becomes a rivalry. It takes something like that to happen for a rivalry to be built. So I think that will happen over time.
I just saw something, and this is completely off what I was planning on talking about, but I noticed this because I was looking it up on Monday. Norman, Oklahoma is only like 5.5 hours from Shreveport, and that surprised me a little bit. I also did not know that Norman, Oklahoma was 20 minutes away from Oklahoma City. Kind of thought it was out in the middle of nowhere, and like we had the Oklahoma guest on Monday. It's like, I think people think it's out in the middle of nowhere. Like, it's suburban Oklahoma City, which I didn't realize either. So I will make that trip eventually. My parents live right there. My sister lives right there. Like I can cut that drive in half real easy, zip up to Shreveport, and then 5 hours is not much of anything. That's the same as Oxford to here, which I've done a couple times. So I think geographically and in terms of in some stuff that's built up, like that game will get interesting. LSU played Oklahoma for a national championship in 2003. In January of 2004, LSU played Oklahoma in the semifinal in 2019. They're going to be good. I think that's going to be an incredible environment in the last week of the season in Tiger Stadium. So I'm here for it. We'll see. But if you want to read more of that story, you can see it over at The Athletic. Stuart Mandel wrote it. Hey, thanks for watching Hunt on LSU. Before you get out of here, do us a couple of favors. Hit that like button, leave your comments below, and subscribe to the channel for all your Fighting Tiger football talk. See you next time.